Sarah Mitchell walked into the crowded sports bar, her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing jeans with a plain white t-shirt. She looked like any other 28-year-old woman enjoying a Friday night out with friends. The bar was packed with the usual weekend crowd, office workers unwinding after a long week, college students celebrating, and groups of friends catching up over drinks and wings. She made her way to a high-top table where her college roommates were already seated. Jessica, Emma, and Lauren had been planning this reunion for months. They hadn't all been together since graduation 6 years ago, and everyone was excited to catch up on their lives. Sarah, Emma squealed, jumping up to give her a hug. You look exactly the same. Tell us everything. What have you been up to? We know you joined the Navy, but you've been so secretive about everything else. Sarah smiled warmly at her friends. These were the people who knew her when she was just a communications major who spent most of her time in the library. They had no idea how much her life had changed since those college days when their biggest worry was passing organic chemistry. Oh, just the usual Navy stuff, Sarah said casually, sliding into her seat. Lots of training, some travel. Nothing too exciting. The truth was far from ordinary. For the past 4 years, Sarah had been part of one of the most elite military units in the world. She was a Navy SEAL, one of only a handful of women who had ever completed the grueling training program. Her days were filled with classified missions, advanced combat training, and operations that most people only saw in movies. But tonight, she just wanted to be Sarah from college, catching up with old friends. Come on, spill. Jessica insisted. The Navy has to be more exciting than my job at the accounting firm. Please tell me you have some good stories. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion broke out at the bar. A group of men in their 30s, clearly several drinks in, were getting louder and more aggressive with each round. Their voices carried across the restaurant as they made crude comments about women walking by their table. Look at that blonde over there, one of them said loudly, pointing at a woman trying to enjoy dinner with her boyfriend. Bet she'd be more fun than whoever she's with. The woman looked uncomfortable and tried to ignore them, but the men continued their commentary. Other patrons started shifting in their seats, the atmosphere in the bar becoming tense. Seriously, though, Lauren said, trying to continue their conversation despite the growing distraction. What's Navy life really like? Do you get to travel to cool places? Sarah nodded, keeping one eye on the situation developing at the bar. I've seen some interesting places, she said. Been to the Middle East, Southeast Asia, a few other spots. The people you work with become like family. What she didn't mention was that those interesting places were often hostile territories where she and her team conducted high-stakes rescue operations and intelligence-gathering missions. The family she referred to were some of the most highly trained warriors in the world, people who would trust her with their lives and vice versa. The rowdy group at the bar was getting worse. Now they were making comments about Sarah's table, their voices getting louder and more obnoxious. Hey, sweetheart, one of them called out to Emma, who was facing their direction. Why don't you and your friends come sit with some real men instead of whatever boys you usually hang out with? Emma's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger. Just ignore them, she whispered to the group. But the men weren't giving up. The apparent leader of their group, a stocky guy with a buzz cut wearing a too-tight polo shirt, stood up and started walking toward their table. His friends followed, clearly enjoying the show. Come on, ladies, Buzz Cut said as he approached their table. We're just trying to be friendly. No need to be so stuck up. We're fine. Thanks, Jessica said politely but firmly. We're just trying to have a quiet dinner. Quiet's boring, another one of the men said. You girls look like you need someone to show you a good time. We've got a table right over there, and we're buying. Sarah watched the interaction carefully. Her friends were clearly uncomfortable, but they were trying to handle the situation politely. She could see the signs of escalation. The men's body language was becoming more aggressive, and they weren't taking no for an answer. We appreciate the offer, but we're really not interested, Lauren said, her voice slightly shaking. Not interested? The buzz-cut man laughed. Come on, what else are you going to do? Sit here and talk about your boring jobs all night? We're offering you an upgrade. The situation was classic. A group of intoxicated men who believed they were entitled to women's attention, using intimidation when their advances were rejected. Sarah had seen it before, and she knew exactly how these scenarios typically played out. The men would continue escalating until either the women gave in to avoid confrontation or things would get physical. Look, Emma said, standing up. We've told you we're not interested. Please just leave us alone. Whoa, feisty, one of the other men said. I like that. Come on, honey, don't be difficult. Sarah remained seated, but she was assessing everything. The men's positions, their level of intoxication, potential weapons, exit routes, and bystanders who might get caught in the middle if things went south. Old habits from her training kicked in automatically. Seriously, guys, Jessica tried one more time. We just want to have a quiet evening with our friend. Can you please respect that? The leader stepped closer, now invading their personal space. Your friend? He looked directly at Sarah for the first time. What about you, quiet girl? You going to be rude too? Or do you know how to have fun? Sarah looked up at him calmly. I'm having fun right here with my friends. Come on, don't be like that, he said, reaching out to touch her shoulder. I bet underneath that good girl act, you're a wild one. That was the line crossed. Sarah gently moved his hand away from her shoulder. Please don't touch me. Oh, what are you going to do about it? He laughed, his friends joining in. Call the manager? Get us kicked out? Face it, sweetheart, you're stuck with us until we decide we're done talking to you. The entire bar was watching now. Some patrons looked concerned, but no one seemed willing to intervene. The bartender was a young guy who looked like he was hoping the situation would resolve itself. A few other customers had their phones out, probably preparing to call police if things got worse. Listen, Sarah said, standing up slowly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not looking for company tonight. Misunderstanding? The man stepped even closer. The only misunderstanding is you thinking you get to decide when this conversation is over. His friends spread out slightly, effectively surrounding their table. Sarah noticed the tactical positioning immediately. Whether they realized it or not, they had created a containment formation that made it difficult for her friends to leave. You know what I think? The leader continued. I think you girls have been sitting in your little bubble too long. You need someone to remind you how the real world works. And how does the real world work? Sarah asked calmly. Simple, he grinned. Pretty girls like you are supposed to be nice to guys like us. That's just the natural order of things. Sarah's friends looked terrified. They had never seen her in any kind of confrontational situation. In college, Sarah had been the peacemaker, the one who avoided conflicts and tried to find diplomatic solutions to problems. I see, Sarah said thoughtfully. And what happens if we don't want to be nice? Then, we make you want to, another one of the men said, stepping closer to Lauren, who immediately stepped back. That's interesting logic, Sarah said. Tell me, where exactly did you learn that approach works? The leader looked confused by her calm response. Most people either backed down or got angry when confronted with this level of intimidation. Sarah's measured tone was throwing him off his script. What's your deal, he asked. You think you're better than us or something? I don't think anything about you, Sarah replied. I don't know you, but I do know that my friends, and I want to be left alone, and you're not respecting that. Respect, he laughed loudly. You want respect? Here's some respect. You're going to sit back down, order another round, and be grateful that we're even talking to you. The situation was reaching a critical point. Sarah could see that her friends were genuinely scared, and the men were becoming more aggressive. The leader was clearly the type who needed to win every confrontation to maintain his self-image. You know what? Sarah said, reaching for her purse. Maybe we should just call it a night. Oh no, the man said, putting his hand on the table to block her path. You're not going anywhere until we say you can go. This conversation isn't over. Actually, Sarah said quietly, it is. Something in her tone made the man pause. There was a certainty in her voice that suggested she wasn't just hoping the situation would end. She was stating a fact. What did you say? He asked, leaning closer. Sarah looked directly into his eyes. I said this conversation is over. You and your friends are going to go back to your table, finish your drinks, and leave these ladies alone. The man's face turned red with anger. Listen here, sweetheart, don't call me sweetheart, Sarah interrupted, her voice still calm but with an edge that made several people nearby stop their conversations. Or what? He challenged. What exactly are you going to do about it? Sarah remained perfectly still, but something had shifted. Her friends noticed it first, the way she was standing, the look in her eyes, the complete absence of fear that had been building in everyone else around the table. I'm going to ask you one more time to leave us alone, she said simply. The man laughed, but it sounded forced now. You're going to ask me? That's cute. You know what I think? I think you need to learn some manners. He reached out to grab her arm, confident that his size and the presence of his friends would be enough to intimidate her into compliance. That was his mistake. What happened next lasted less than 3 seconds, but it changed everything. As the man's hand moved towards Sarah's arm, she smoothly stepped to the side and caught his wrist in a grip that looked gentle but immediately sent shooting pain up his entire arm. Before he could react, she had twisted his arm behind his back and applied just enough pressure to a specific nerve point that his knees began to buckle. What the hell dash, he started to say, but Sarah increased the pressure slightly, and his words turned into a sharp intake of breath. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah said in the same calm voice she had been using all evening, though now everyone in earshot could hear the authority in it. You're going to apologize to my friends for being rude. Then, you and your group are going to go back to your table, pay your tab, and leave. The man's friends stood frozen, not understanding how their leader had gone from being in control to being completely helpless in the space of a heartbeat. The transformation had been so smooth and quick that most of the bar's patrons weren't even sure what they had just witnessed. Let me go, the man said through gritted teeth. I will, as soon as you apologize, Sarah replied. And I want you to understand something. What I'm doing right now is showing restraint. I could end this situation in ways that would require medical attention, but I'd rather not ruin everyone's evening. Her friends stared in shock. This was not the Sarah they remembered from college. The quiet communications major who had never even raised her voice was somehow completely in control of a situation that had seemed hopeless just moments before. I don't know what kind of martial arts crap you think you know, one of his friends said, taking a step forward, but there's 4 of us and 1 of you. Sarah looked at him without releasing his friend. You're right, those are the numbers. Are you sure you want to test whether that matters? There was something in her voice that made him stop mid-step. It wasn't a threat or a boast. It was the tone of someone stating a simple fact, like mentioning the weather or the time. Look, lady, we don't want any trouble, another one said, clearly recognizing that the situation had shifted dramatically. Then, you shouldn't have created trouble, Sarah replied. But the good news is that this can still end peacefully. All it requires is an apology and your departure. The man whose arm she was controlling was clearly in pain, but he was also humiliated. His entire self-image was built around intimidating people, and now he was being controlled by someone half his size in front of a room full of witnesses. This is crazy, he said. You can't just attack people. I haven't attacked anyone, Sarah said calmly. You attempted to grab me without permission, and I prevented that from happening. What happens next is entirely up to you. The bartender had finally worked up the courage to approach the situation. Hey, is everything okay over here? Everything's fine, Sarah said without taking her eyes off the men. These gentlemen were just leaving, weren't you? The pressure on his arm was increasing gradually. The man realized that Sarah could probably break his arm if she wanted to, and there wasn't anything he could do to stop her. He had never been in a situation where someone smaller than him had this kind of physical control. Okay, he said finally. Let me go and we'll leave. Apologize first, Sarah said. His pride warred with his pain for a moment, but the pain won. Sorry, he muttered. Sorry for what? Sarah asked. Sorry for bothering you, he said louder. And sorry for being disrespectful, she prompted. And sorry for being disrespectful, he repeated. Sarah released his arm and stepped back smoothly, positioning herself between her friends and the group of men. The man rubbed his arm and glared at her, but he had learned enough not to try anything else. How did you do that? One of his friends asked, genuinely curious despite the situation. Training, Sarah said simply. The men gathered their things and headed toward the exit, but not before the leader turned back for one final comment. You think you're tough, but you got lucky tonight, sweetheart. Next time might be different. There won't be a next time, Sarah said with absolute certainty. And don't call me sweetheart. They left, and the bar slowly returned to normal, though many patrons continued to glance over at Sarah's table. The immediate crisis was over, but her friends were staring at her like they had never seen her before. What just happened? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah sat back down as if nothing unusual had occurred. Some guys were being rude, so they left. Sarah, Jessica said slowly, where did you learn to do that? Do what? Sarah asked, taking a sip of her water. Don't play dumb, Lawrence said. I don't even know what you did, but you completely controlled that guy. He was twice your size. Sarah realized that her cover story of just Navy stuff wasn't going to be sufficient anymore. Her friends had just seen her demonstrate capabilities that normal Navy personnel don't typically have. It's part of my training, she said carefully. The Navy teaches hand-to-hand combat. The Navy teaches you to do that? Emma asked, because that looked like something out of a movie. Sarah chose her words carefully. I've received some specialized training. What kind of specialized training? Jessica pressed. Before Sarah could answer, the bartender approached their table with a round of drinks. These are from the couple over there, he said, pointing to a man and woman at the bar. They said thank you for handling that situation. Those guys have been causing problems all week. After he left, Sarah's friends continued to stare at her expectantly. Seriously, Sarah, Lawrence said, we've been friends for years. What aren't you telling us? Sarah looked at the three women who had been her closest friends in college. They had shared everything, secrets about crushes, family problems, career worries. But this was different. This was classified information that could affect national security if it fell into the wrong hands. I can't really talk about the specifics, she said finally. But I'm not just regular Navy. I'm in a special program that requires additional training. What kind of special program? Emma asked. The kind where I can't discuss details, Sarah replied. Her friends exchanged glances. They were clearly frustrated by her evasiveness, but they were also beginning to understand that their college roommate had become someone far more complex than they had imagined. Are you in some kind of secret military thing? Jessica asked. Sarah smiled, but didn't answer directly. I help keep people safe. Like what we just saw? Lauren asked. Sometimes, Sarah admitted. The conversation was interrupted by another approach to their table, but this time it was friendly. An older man in his 60s walked over with his wife. Excuse me, he said to Sarah. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I wanted to say thank you for what you did. My wife and I saw the whole thing, and those men were completely out of line. It was nothing, Sarah said. It wasn't nothing, the man's wife said firmly. Young lady, I've been coming to this bar for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that so professionally. You stayed calm, you didn't escalate, and you protected your friends. That was impressive. Are you military? The man asked. Sarah nodded. Navy. I could tell, he said. I served 30 years Army myself. Haven't seen moves like that since special operations training. Sarah's friends caught the implication immediately. The old soldier was basically confirming what they had started to suspect. Their friend wasn't just regular military. After the couple left, the questions started again. Special operations? Emma said. Sarah, are you some kind of Navy commando or something? Sarah laughed, but it sounded a bit forced. That's a very dramatic way to put it. But it's true, isn't it? Jessica asked. You're not just in the regular Navy. You're in something special. Sarah realized that denying it would be pointless at this stage. Her friends had seen too much, and they knew her well enough to recognize when she was being evasive. I'm in a unit that handles certain types of operations, she said carefully. Operations that require additional training in combat techniques. What kind of operations? Lauren asked. I can't discuss that, Sarah said firmly. But I can tell you that everything I do is in service of protecting people. Her friend sat quietly for a moment, processing this information. The Sarah they had known in college had been studious and gentle, someone who got upset when people were mean to stray cats. The idea that she was now some kind of elite warrior was difficult to reconcile. Is it dangerous? Emma asked quietly. Sarah considered the question. In the past year alone, she had been shot at multiple times, had participated in raids on terrorist compounds, and had conducted reconnaissance missions in hostile territory. Just 3 months ago, her team had rescued American hostages from a compound in Somalia. Sometimes, she said honestly. Are you happy? Jessica asked. That was a more complex question. Sarah loved her work. She felt like she was making a real difference in the world, and she worked with people she respected and trusted completely. But it was also isolating. She couldn't talk about her experiences with civilian friends, couldn't maintain normal relationships, and lived with constant awareness that each mission might be her last. Yes, she said. I feel like I'm doing something important. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their food, which gave everyone a chance to process what had been revealed. Sarah's friends were clearly struggling with the realization that their college roommate had become someone they barely recognized. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you before, Sarah said as they started eating. There are rules about what I can and can't discuss. We understand, Lauren said, though she still looked shaken. It's just, you seem so normal. Sarah smiled. I am normal. I still like the same movies, I still can't cook anything more complicated than pasta, and I still cry during dog commercials. But you can also apparently take down multiple attackers without breaking a sweat, Emma added. Training becomes second nature after a while, Sarah explained. It's like riding a bike. Once you learn it, you don't really think about it anymore. How long have you been doing this? Jessica asked. About 4 years, Sarah said. 4 years, Emma said. So you've been doing this almost the entire time since graduation? Sarah nodded. I joined right after college, went through basic training, then additional training for my current role. And you never thought to mention this? Lauren asked, though her tone was more amazed than accusatory. I mention what I can, Sarah said. I tell people I'm in the Navy, I talk about traveling, I share what I'm allowed to share. But there are parts of my life that have to stay private. Her friends were beginning to understand the isolation that came with Sarah's career choice. She lived in a world they couldn't access, doing things they couldn't know about, with people they would never meet. Do you ever regret it? Emma asked. Sarah thought about the question seriously. There were definitely sacrifices, missed birthdays, holidays spent away from family, the constant awareness that she might not come home from the next mission. But there were also moments like the one 3 months ago when she had helped reunite parents with children who had been kidnapped by human traffickers. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. But I do miss being able to share more of my life with the people I care about. The evening continued with more careful questions and cautious answers. Sarah shared what she could about her training and her travels, while avoiding anything that might be classified. Her friends began to understand that their quiet college roommate had become someone extraordinary, someone who risked her life to protect others. By the time they left the bar, the dynamic between the 4 friends had shifted permanently. Sarah was no longer just their college roommate. She was someone who lived in a world of secrets and danger, someone whose skills could turn a threatening situation into a controlled one in seconds. As they said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Emma gave Sarah an extra long hug. Be careful out there, she whispered. I will, Sarah promised. And if you ever need anything at all, you call us, Jessica added. Sarah smiled, feeling grateful for friends who could accept this new version of who she had become, even if they couldn't fully understand it. I will, she said again, meaning it. As she drove home that night, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since college. She had gained skills and experiences that most people couldn't imagine, but she had also lost some of the simple innocence that had defined her younger years. Tonight had been a reminder of both the benefits and the costs of the path she had chosen. The benefits were clear. She had been able to protect her friends from a potentially dangerous situation. The costs were equally clear. She could never again be just Sarah from college, having a normal night out with friends. But as she pulled into her driveway, she realized that she was okay with that trade-off. She had found her purpose, even if it came with complications that her younger self never could have imagined. 3 weeks after the incident at the bar, Sarah was back to her regular routine. Monday morning found her at the Naval Special Warfare Command facility in San Diego, preparing for what her commanding officer had described as a routine training exercise. In Sarah's experience, nothing was ever truly routine in the SEAL teams. She arrived at 0500 hours, joining her team members in the equipment room. Team 6 was a tight-knit group of 8 operators who had been working together for over 2 years. They knew each other's strengths, weaknesses, and habits better than most married couples. Morning, sunshine, called out Marcus Torres, the team's demolitions expert, as Sarah walked in. Marcus was a stocky former Marine from Texas who treated every day like it might be his last chance to have fun. Morning, Torres, Sarah replied, checking her gear methodically. Please tell me you didn't volunteer us for another underwater demolition exercise. I'm still finding sand in places sand should never be. Not my fault this time, Marcus grinned. This one came from the top. Something about testing new equipment. Sarah's team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, entered the room carrying a briefing folder. Sullivan was a 15-year veteran who had earned his reputation in Iraq and Afghanistan before transitioning to special operations. He was known for his calm demeanor under pressure and his ability to make split-second tactical decisions. "Gather round," Sullivan said, setting the folder on the central table. "We've got an interesting scenario today. Intelligence suggests we might be deploying to Eastern Europe within the next month for a hostage rescue operation. Today's exercise is designed to test our readiness for urban warfare in a cold climate environment." The team gathered around as Sullivan opened the folder, revealing photos of a mock facility that had been constructed specifically for training purposes. It looked like a small industrial complex with multiple buildings, underground tunnels, and various defensive positions. "The scenario is straightforward," Sullivan continued. "American citizens have been taken hostage by a militant group. The hostages are being held in this facility, which intelligence suggests has approximately 20 hostile combatants with military training. Our job is to infiltrate, neutralize the threats, and extract the hostages without casualties." Sarah studied the aerial photographs carefully. The facility was well designed for defense, with multiple choke points and elevated positions that would favor defenders. Getting in quietly would be challenging, and getting out with hostages would be even more difficult. "What's our timeline?" asked David Kim, the team's communications specialist and sniper. "Wheels up in 2 hours," Sullivan replied. "We'll be transported to the training facility by helicopter, where we'll have 4 hours to complete the mission. Full gear, live ammunition for training purposes, and real-time evaluation from our instructors." Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before any mission, even training ones. She had participated in dozens of these exercises, but they never became routine. Each one presented new challenges and required the team to adapt and improvise. "Any specific objectives beyond hostage extraction?" asked Rachel Martinez, the team's medic and close-quarters combat specialist. "Intel suggests the facility contains sensitive information about future attacks," Sullivan said. "Secondary objective is to secure any intelligence materials we can find. Tertiary objective is to capture at least one hostile for interrogation." The briefing continued for 30 minutes, covering entry points, communication protocols, and contingency plans. Sarah's role would be point person for the initial breach, using her smaller size and speed to clear the first building while the rest of the team provided support. After the briefing, the team spent an hour preparing their equipment. Sarah selected her preferred weapons, a compact assault rifle for close-quarters work and a sidearm for backup. She also packed specialized breaching charges, night vision equipment, and medical supplies. "You seem focused today," observed Martinez as they checked their gear. Rachel was one of the few other women in special operations, and she and Sarah had developed a strong working relationship based on mutual respect and shared experiences. "Always focused," Sarah replied, testing the action on her rifle. "But, you're right, I've got something on my mind. Want to talk about it?" Sarah considered whether to share what had happened at the bar with her teammates. In the civilian world, she had to hide her capabilities and her true profession. Here, among people who understood the unique demands of their work, she could be completely honest. "I had an encounter with some civilians a few weeks ago," Sarah said. "Guys at a bar who wouldn't take no for an answer. Had to use some restraint techniques to end the situation." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "How did that go?" "Smoothly," Sarah said. "But it made me think about the divide between our world and theirs. My college friends were with me, and they had no idea I could handle something like that." "That's always the hardest part," Martinez agreed. "Living in both worlds. Most people have no idea what we're capable of, and sometimes that's for the best." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their helicopter transport. The team loaded their gear and settled in for the 30-minute flight to the training facility. During the flight, they reviewed the mission plan one final time and conducted last-minute equipment checks. The training facility was located in a remote area of the Mojave Desert, designed to replicate various urban environments that SEAL teams might encounter around the world. The mock facility for today's exercise was based on intelligence gathered from actual terrorist compounds in Eastern Europe. As the helicopter landed, Sarah could see the target building complex about a mile away. It looked exactly like the photos in their briefing, a series of concrete structures connected by courtyards and surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire. "Remember," Sullivan said as they disembarked, "this is as close to real as we can make it. The opposing force is made up of experienced military personnel who know our tactics. They'll be using paint rounds, but they're playing to win." The team moved out on foot, using the desert terrain to approach the facility undetected. Sarah took point, using her training to navigate through rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation while avoiding the surveillance cameras and motion sensors that had been placed around the perimeter. As they got closer, Sarah could see movement in the guard towers. The opposing force was alert and ready. This wasn't going to be easy. The team reached their first checkpoint without being detected. Sullivan signaled for Sarah to move forward and assess the main entrance. She low-crawled through a drainage ditch that ran along the facility's eastern side, getting close enough to observe the guard patterns and defensive positions. What she saw was concerning. The opposing force had set up a sophisticated defense with overlapping fields of fire and multiple backup positions. A frontal assault would likely result in heavy casualties, even in a training scenario. Sarah made her way back to the team's position and reported her observations. Sullivan listened carefully, then made the decision to switch to their secondary plan, a stealth infiltration through the facility's underground maintenance tunnels. "Mitchell, you're still on point," Sullivan said. "Torres, you're with her for the breach. The rest of us will provide overwatch and follow once you've secured the entry point." Sarah and Marcus moved toward the tunnel entrance, which was located behind a small maintenance building about 200 meters from the main complex. The entrance was supposed to be unguarded according to their intelligence, but Sarah's instincts told her to be careful. Her caution proved justified when she spotted two guards positioned near the tunnel entrance, hidden behind a pile of construction materials. They were well concealed and would have been impossible to see from a distance. Sarah signaled the guard positions to Marcus, then began planning their approach. The guards were alert and professional. This wasn't going to be a simple takedown. Using hand signals, Sarah coordinated with Marcus to approach from two different angles. She moved through a series of concrete pipes while Marcus circled around through some abandoned equipment. The plan was to neutralize both guards simultaneously to prevent either one from raising an alarm. Sarah reached her position and waited for Marcus to get into place. She could see her target clearly now, a well-trained operator who was scanning the area methodically. Taking him down would require precision timing and perfect execution. When Marcus signaled that he was ready, Sarah moved. She covered the 15 meters between her hiding spot and the guard in less than 3 seconds, using a combination of speed and stealth that she had perfected through years of training. The takedown was textbook perfect. Sarah approached from the guard's blind spot, disabled him with a sleeper hold, and lowered him to the ground without making a sound. Simultaneously, Marcus eliminated the second guard using the same technique. With the entrance secured, Sarah and Marcus began their descent into the tunnel system. The tunnels were dark, cramped, and filled with the kind of obstacles that made movement difficult and dangerous. Sarah led the way, using night vision equipment to navigate through the maze of pipes and electrical conduits that ran beneath the facility. According to their intelligence, the tunnels would lead them directly under the building where the hostages were being held. The tunnel infiltration took 20 minutes of careful movement through increasingly tight spaces. Sarah had always been comfortable in confined environments, but these tunnels were challenging even by SEAL standards. They finally reached the access point that would bring them up inside the target building. Sarah carefully removed the access panel and used a fiber optic camera to survey the room above. It appeared to be a storage area with no visible guards, but she could hear voices coming from somewhere nearby. Sarah and Marcus emerged from the tunnel and quickly established defensive positions. The building's interior was exactly as depicted in their intelligence photos, a series of connected rooms with multiple levels and numerous hiding spots for both hostiles and hostages. Using their communication equipment, Sarah contacted Sullivan to report their successful infiltration. The rest of the team was moving into position around the building's perimeter, ready to provide support once the rescue operation began. "We're in position," Sarah whispered into her microphone. Beginning search for hostages now. The next phase of the mission would be the most dangerous. Sarah and Marcus had to locate the hostages, neutralize any guards in the immediate area, and secure the area for extraction, all while avoiding the 20 hostile combatants who were somewhere in the building. Sarah moved through the building with the fluid precision that came from years of training and real-world experience. Every corner was cleared methodically, every room searched systematically. She could hear movement on the floors above and below, indicating that the opposing force was actively patrolling the building. The first hostile contact came sooner than expected. As Sarah rounded a corner on the building's second floor, she came face to face with an enemy combatant who was just as surprised to see her as she was to see him. Training took over immediately. Sarah's weapon came up faster than her opponent's, and her paint round struck him center mass before he could get a shot off. The engagement lasted less than 2 seconds, but it meant that stealth was no longer an option. Contact, Sarah reported quietly. Hostile down, but they'll know we're here now. Copy that, Sullivan responded. Accelerate the timeline. Find those hostages. Sarah and Marcus moved faster now, knowing that the opposing force would be converging on their position. They had minutes, maybe less, before they would be facing overwhelming odds. The hostages were located on the building's 3rd floor, in what appeared to be a conference room that had been converted into a holding area. Sarah could see them through a window in the door, 3 people sitting on the floor with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. But between Sarah's team and the hostages were at least 6 guards, positioned in defensive positions throughout the corridor leading to the room. This is going to get interesting, Marcus muttered, checking his ammunition. Sarah was already formulating a plan. The rescue was about to become a full-scale firefight, and success would depend on precision, timing, and a little bit of luck. The most challenging part of any hostage rescue wasn't getting in, it was getting everyone out alive. Sarah studied the corridor ahead, counting the defensive positions and calculating angles of approach. 6 guards protected the hostage room, positioned behind overturned tables and concrete barriers. Each position had overlapping fields of fire, creating a kill zone that would be extremely difficult to cross. Sullivan, we have eyes on the hostages, Sarah reported. 3 civilians, secured in room 304. Multiple hostiles between our position and the target. What's your assessment? Sullivan's voice came through her earpiece. We need a distraction, Sarah replied. Something to draw their attention while we make the approach. Before Sullivan could respond, the building's fire alarm began blaring. Martinez's voice came through the communications system, gift from the outside team. Smoke grenades deployed on the 1st floor. You've got maybe 2 minutes before they figure out it's a diversion. The alarm was perfect cover for movement, but it also meant the guards would be on high alert. Sarah watched as 2 of the 6 guards moved away from their positions to investigate the alarm, reducing the odds, but also indicating that the remaining 4 were the most experienced operators. Torres, suppressing fire on my mark, Sarah said. I'm going to flank left through that conference room. Copy that, Marcus replied, positioning himself for the best angle of attack. Sarah moved quickly through a series of office cubicles, using them for cover as she worked her way toward the guard's left flank. The building's layout was working in her favor. Multiple rooms and corridors provided numerous approach routes. She reached the conference room that would give her a clear shot at 2 of the remaining guards. Through the room's glass partition, she could see them maintaining their positions, weapons trained on the main corridor where they expected an attack to come from. In position, Sarah whispered. On your mark, Marcus responded. Sarah counted down silently, then gave the signal. Marcus opened fire with controlled bursts, forcing the guards to take cover and focus their attention on his position. Simultaneously, Sarah breached the conference room and engaged the 2 guards on the left flank. Her first shot struck the nearest guard center mass, eliminating him from the exercise. The second guard spun toward her position, but Sarah was already moving, using the conference table for cover as she engaged from a new angle. Her second shot found its target before he could return fire. 2 down, Sarah reported, already moving toward the next position. The remaining 2 guards had repositioned themselves, using the confusion of Marcus's suppressing fire to establish new defensive positions closer to the hostage room. They were professionals who understood that their job was to protect the room, not necessarily to eliminate the attacking force. Sarah found herself in a tactical chess match. The guards knew she was flanking and had positioned themselves to cover all approaches to the hostage room. Any direct assault would likely result in simulated casualties for her team and potentially the hostages. "Mitchell, we're running out of time," Sullivan's voice came through her earpiece. "The other hostiles are converging on your floor." Sarah could hear movement in the stairwells and corridors around them. The opposing force was repositioning to trap her team on the third floor. They had minutes before being completely surrounded. "Torres, new plan," Sarah said. "I need you to breach that wall between us and the hostage room." "Which wall?" Marcus asked. "The one behind the guard position. Conference room shares a wall with the hostage room. Small charge, just enough to create an opening." "That's a pretty tight calculation," Marcus replied. "If I use too much explosive, we could hurt the hostages." "Trust me," Sarah said. "I'll coordinate with the timing." While Marcus prepared his breaching charge, Sarah positioned herself for a frontal assault on the remaining guards. Her plan was to draw their attention and fire while Marcus created the breach from an unexpected direction. "Ready," Marcus reported. Sarah took a deep breath and moved into the corridor, immediately drawing fire from both guards. She used a rolling technique to move between cover points, keeping both guards focused on her position while avoiding their paint rounds. The explosion came exactly when Sarah expected it, creating a hole in the wall large enough for Marcus to move through. The guards spun toward the new threat, giving Sarah the opening she needed to eliminate both of them with precise shots. "Hostiles down," Sarah reported, moving to secure hostages. She and Marcus entered the hostage room simultaneously from different directions. The three hostages, actually training personnel playing their roles, looked appropriately relieved to see them. "We're here to get you out," Sarah said, beginning to cut their zip ties. "Stay low and follow our instructions exactly." "Are there more of them?" one of the hostages asked, playing his role perfectly. "We're handling it," Sarah replied, helping him to his feet. "Just stay behind us and move when we move." The next challenge was extraction. Sarah's team had to get 3 civilians down 3 flights of stairs and out of a building while avoiding the hostile forces that were converging on their position. "Sullivan, hostages secured." "Need extraction route," Sarah reported. "East stairwell is clear for now," Sullivan replied. "Martinez is covering the exit. You've got about 90 seconds before the opposing force cuts you off." Sarah organized the hostages between herself and Marcus, with the strongest civilian in the middle to help support the others if needed. They moved out of the room and toward the stairwell, moving as quickly as possible while maintaining security. The descent to the second floor went smoothly, but as they reached the landing, Sarah heard movement in the corridor below. The opposing force had anticipated their route and was moving to intercept. "Contact below," Sarah whispered into her microphone. "Multiple hostiles in the first-floor corridor." "Copy that," Sullivan responded. "Kim is in position for sniper support." Window on the east side of the building. Sarah's team reached the first floor and prepared for the final sprint to the exit. Through the stairwell door, she could see at least 4 hostile combatants positioned between them and the exit that Martinez was covering. "This is going to be fast," Sarah told the hostages. "Stay low, stay together, and don't stop moving until we're outside." She coordinated the final movement with precision timing. Kim's sniper support eliminated 2 of the guards through the window, while Martinez provided covering fire from the exit point. Sarah and Marcus moved the hostages through the corridor in a tactical formation that protected them from multiple angles. Paint rounds flew past them as they crossed the open ground, but Sarah's team maintained their protective formation around the civilians. They reached the exit without casualties, and Martinez guided them to a secure extraction point where Sullivan and the rest of the team were waiting. "Mission complete," Sullivan announced as they reached the designated safe area. "All hostages extracted, no friendly casualties." The exercise officially ended, and the opposing force members began emerging from their positions. As was customary after training exercises, both teams gathered for a debrief session to discuss what had worked well and what could be improved. "Outstanding work," said Colonel Harrison, the senior instructor who had been observing the exercise. "Particularly impressive breach and extraction sequence. The wall demolition was a creative solution that caught the opposing force completely off guard." Sarah felt the satisfaction that came from a successful mission, even a training one. Her team had worked together flawlessly, adapting to changing circumstances and finding solutions to tactical problems under pressure. After the debrief, Sarah's team began the process of cleaning and storing their equipment. It was tedious work, but essential for maintaining their gear in perfect working condition. "Good work today," Sullivan said to Sarah as they packed up their weapons. "Your flanking maneuver was textbook, and the wall breach idea was inspired." "Team effort," Sarah replied. "Torres made the breach work, and Kim's sniper support was perfect." "That's what makes this work," Sullivan agreed. Individual skills combined with team coordination. As they prepared to board the helicopter for the return flight, Sarah reflected on how different this environment was from the civilian world she had experienced at the bar 3 weeks earlier. Here, her skills were not only accepted but essential. Her teammates relied on her capabilities, and she relied on theirs. The flight back to base was quiet, with team members either resting or reviewing the day's lessons. Sarah found herself thinking about the balance she maintained between her two worlds, the secret world of special operations and the normal world of civilian friends and relationships. Back at base, Sarah completed her after-action reports and secured her equipment for the night. It was late afternoon, and she had no specific plans for the evening. Most of her teammates were married or in relationships, and they would be heading home to families who understood the demands of their work, even if they couldn't know the specific details. Sarah drove to her small apartment near the base, a place that reflected the temporary nature of her lifestyle. She kept it neat and functional, but there were few personal touches beyond some framed photos of her family and her college friends. As she prepared dinner, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Jessica's name. "Hey," Sarah answered. "How are you?" "I'm good," Jessica replied. "But I've been thinking about that night at the bar. Emma and Lauren have been talking about it too." "What about it?" Sarah asked, though she could guess where this conversation was heading. "We've been researching," Jessica said, "about special operations, Navy SEALs, that kind of thing." "Sarah, are you a Navy SEAL?" The direct question hung in the air. Sarah had been expecting this conversation ever since that night at the bar, but she still wasn't sure how to handle it. "Why would you think that?" Sarah asked. "Because everything fits," Jessica said. "The way you handled those guys, the training you mentioned, the secrecy about your work. Plus, we found some articles about women in special operations. There aren't many, but there are some." Sarah sat down at her kitchen table, realizing that her college friends were more perceptive than she had given them credit for. "Jess," she said finally, "there are things about my work that I can't discuss. Not because I don't trust you, but because there are rules about what information can be shared. So you can't confirm or deny it," Jessica said. "Something like that," Sarah replied. "Well, we want you to know that we're proud of you," Jessica said. "Whatever you're doing, we know it's important, and we know you're good at it." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in months. Her friend's acceptance meant more to her than they could know. "Thank you," she said. "That means everything to me. We also want you to know that we're here for you," Jessica continued. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you just call us. We may not understand your world, but we understand friendship." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her kitchen thinking about the conversation. Her friends had figured out more than she had intended to reveal, but their response had been exactly what she had hoped for: acceptance and support without demanding details she couldn't provide. She realized that maintaining relationships with people outside the special operations community was more important than she had previously understood. These connections to her pre-military life helped her remember who she was before she became a weapon, and who she would still be after her military career ended. That evening, Sarah decided to call her parents, something she had been putting off for several weeks. Her father answered on the second ring. "Sarah, how are you, sweetheart?" he said, using the same endearment that had irritated her so much when the stranger at the bar had used it. "I'm good, Dad," she replied. "Just wanted to check in and see how you and Mom are doing." They talked for 30 minutes about family news, her brother's new job, her mother's garden, and the 1,000 small details that made up normal family life. Sarah didn't mention the training exercise or the bar incident or any of the complexities of her current existence. Instead, she listened to her father talk about his work at the insurance company and her mother's volunteer activities at the local hospital. It was wonderfully ordinary, and it reminded her that there was a whole world of people living normal lives, unaware of the threats that she and her teammates worked to prevent. When she hung up the phone, Sarah felt more balanced than she had in weeks. She had found a way to honor both sides of her life, the professional warrior and the daughter, friend, and normal person she had been before joining the military. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since college. She had gained capabilities and experiences that most people could never imagine, but she had also learned that staying connected to her civilian relationships was essential for maintaining her humanity. The woman who could neutralize multiple attackers in a crowded bar was the same woman who still called her parents regularly and cherished friendships from college. Both aspects of her identity were real, and both were important. Tomorrow would bring new training, new challenges, and possibly new missions. But tonight, Sarah Mitchell was simply grateful for the people in her life who accepted her for who she was, even when they didn't fully understand what she did. Outside her window, the lights of San Diego twinkled in the distance, representing millions of people living their lives in safety, most of them unaware that people like Sarah existed to protect them. That knowledge was enough to make all the sacrifices worthwhile. Sarah had found her purpose, and despite all the complications it brought to her personal life, she knew she was exactly where she belonged.